What's going on, y'all? It's Mike Walbert with A3C. You are tuned in to Heavy Talk.
I am super excited to have you here today on Heavy Talk. I want to introduce you myself, but I feel like I will do you a great disservice. So if you could please, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so my journey through the entertainment industry started in 2008 when I started a music production company with two friends of mine from high school called SMKA Productions. We started producing music for a lot of underground artists in Atlanta, from at the time like Pill and Yellow Wolf, and started doing records with Currency and Dom Kennedy and just a lot of internet folks at the time, just reaching out and we were producing for like 100 artists a year. Started getting into managing artists, managed artists named Jaron Benton, Alien Craft, a few other artists, and then started growing a producer base. But from that, in 2009, I met Brian Knott, who had started A3C Festival and Conference. And at the time, it wasn't even A3C Festival and Conference, it was A3C Festival. And it was a small 3-day concert at the Loft with about 30 artists, 10 over each day. And as I tell the story, I went to South by Southwest with B.O.B., who we were working with at the time, one of our producers. And I was blown away by South by Southwest. And I kind of just made a point of like, I think Atlanta should have the biggest, dopest gathering for the hip hop culture, because we were taking buses of artists from Atlanta to Austin to showcase hip hop. And it was just, I just kind of got it in my mind. And so year after year, I just kept growing this event. And then, I started doing it full time in 2012. 2013, I left SMK and management to go full time A3C, built a team. And then 2019, I sold a majority of it to new partners and brought, took it to a new level with The Gathering Spot, Paul Judge, Media Group, and then 2 Chainz and Lou Williams also joined the team in 2019. So, and then in 2020, a pandemic broke out. So I am, like everyone else in the live music event space, am watching, kind of continuing to learn about streaming industry, technology. But I've always been a student of the industry. If you throw a conference, you have to know exactly what's going on.
There are 2 things I want to note. One is you mentioned Yellow Wolf, and I feel like I probably met you sometime back around 2008 because I used to navigate the PR department for Purple Ribbon, and Yellow Wolf was kind of part of our camp, and KP, of course. And then you mentioned Peel, who I did not work with, but of course I knew about him, and I never knew that you were, had your hands in that.
I mean, that was kind of how I think that if you want to get in the music business, the best way, it was the way I got into it, but through a producer, you got to work with everybody. I'm trying to get in the studio with everybody. So my whole thing was just reaching out to people and like, yo, when are you in the studio? Let's get up. And we got something everyone needs, which is beats. So like, it's the easiest way to get into a conversation or start something. And then through that, we started throwing parties, right? And we recently graduated from college, but having grown up in Atlanta, we could bring out a couple hundred people on a Friday, Saturday night. And, if you want to be also being a promoter, if you want to be in anything, some of the biggest people in the music industry started as promoters. If you can learn how to move people across the city and get people excited about an event, that's a lot of work. And that's a tremendous amount of value for any artist, any brand. So when our parties started popping off, and our release parties and our kind of album release parties, people started taking note of like, who are these guys? What are they doing?
It kind of sounds like Scooter Braun's story a little bit, how
man, he's had a little different trajectory than I have.
A little different, but I sat down and talked to him one day because he used to come by Purple Ribbon's office a lot.
I bet.
And so he would come in my office every now and then, and he had artists who ended up being What was the first kid he managed? It was a rapper. I cannot think of his name. But anyway.
Yeah, I would love to know that. No, I heard about Scooter, you know, when he was in Emory, because
Wow.
one of my good friends from high school was his co-promoter.
Oh, wow.
So the two of them would just throw parties and bring out, you know, and again, you're right, like that's his origin story.
And speaking of bringing people out, you know, obviously this was before social media, like, you know, what it is today. So how are you spreading the word? How did you learn how to brand and market what you were doing?
Facebook was kind of just getting going in 2008. But MySpace was big. I mean, this was back when you could send out hundreds of messages on MySpace, and really trying to learn out. I mean, again, like you forget it. It's kind of funny to laugh at this time, but MySpace was a big deal. I mean, if you were big on MySpace, you were huge, and that was the game, right? The biggest concerts at South by Southwest were MySpace, and Yellow Wolf got signed by MySpace through his you know, popularity there, and Young Jock and a bunch of people that were blown up on MySpace. So that was a little bit of the external, but also like, just remember, we grew up in Atlanta, and I played basketball in Atlanta, and we just knew a bunch of people. So we just hit up like our friends, literally just texting people, and then the word gets out, yo, like, you know, because we used to throw house parties back in high school. So now we're throwing concerts,
right?
And you know, word gets out because we knew people at Grady, we knew people at Decatur, we knew people at a lot of the public schools that we kind of played basketball with, and essentially just like that was kind of the network that we had built.
One of the things too I wanted to ask you about, you said that obviously, you know, with COVID happening right now, and you've been just researching and you know, kind of seeing what's going on. What have you learned so far in terms of, you know, moving forward in this new space that we're having to navigate?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I think something like this changes things quickly, right? There's obviously the evolution of music, and again, like just talking about, we are worlds apart from where I started, right? 2008 is almost unrecognizable to what it is now.
Right.
So then you try to like look forward, and I always do this. I always try to, because a conference really isn't about what's happening today. A conference is about what's going to happen. So I'm always a student of what's next and where are the trends going, and I got to try to find that and bring that to the conference. So like I said, I've always been a student of that. Obviously, live streaming has been something that I think has had a foot in the music business for a while. And it's kind of been herky-jerky, right? They haven't really figured out how to monetize it, and it's really expensive. And so I think you're seeing that speed up really quickly. I don't think it's definitely not going to take the place of live music. Live music is an experience that you can't really supplant. But how does streaming complement it, and how does that become an extension of live music? Interaction. And I think the most exciting thing I've seen in the last 5 years is just music distribution and artist development, and looking at how data has kind of become such a huge factor, and not just finding talent. And so you can kind of like, oh, this artist has a song to blow up. Who is this artist? And looking at kind of this metadata of where the plays are coming from. And there's, you know, it becomes a little bit of a kind of a data game a little bit. I hate to say it, because the art, I mean, music is still art. You can't take that out of it. And I'll tell this to anyone. It's like, I think a lot of people can blow artists up on a hit, but sustaining an artist's career is about talent, and really can't, they have to have something that is more than, or a team, and a lot of stuff that's put into it.
Yeah.
So I think music streaming is something that we've all watched really closely. I mean, even with Versus and what the future of kind of like that experience looks like online.
Yeah.
Artists need to find new ways to monetize. I mean, live music has been such a core of artists' income for so long. And honestly, you know, streaming has kind of grown, and as streaming grows, there's a lot more money going into the streaming world and the artists' pockets and the labels' pockets. But, you know, the labels have always kind of said, well, you can make that tour money, right?
Right.
So I think now, and I'm really nervous, because I think we're going to lose some talented artists that we wouldn't have seen otherwise, because people that might have just said, I'm going to try to make some money on tour, they got to make some money somewhere else now. Like this is going to be it's a real tough time for artists, right?
Right.
But I think now they have to build other revenue streams. So
Right.
whether that's their merch line, whether that's direct to customer experiences, kind of building these little communities that they can monetize. And I think subscription-based monetization is huge.
Yeah.
You're seeing like, software for service is like the biggest growth industry. It's like everything from blue plate to like, like these dollar shave clubs. Like,
Right.
so I think artists need to figure out how to monetize in different ways. And this is going to shake shit up and move things quick.
No, for sure. Have you seen a particular artist that's doing it right now?
I don't know if I have. I mean, like, I'll be honest, like, I think there's some awesome music coming out, but
Yeah.
I haven't seen anyone that like has blown me away about like a new business strategy yet. I mean, Erykah Badu has done some really cool stuff, I think, in terms of her live streaming, and I think she has the right idea and probably a really good production team and folks around her. And I think she's getting in subscription base, which I think is essential as opposed to like these one-off concerts.
Yeah.
But I hate to say it, there's not an example of someone. I think there's also really cool innovation. I think, Heavy Sound Labs is a part of that world, but there is a lot of cool innovation happening on the team, label, and distribution side. But no, and if you know of something, let me know, because I'd love to check it out.
You know what? I will say, I don't know if you know this about me, but I've always been, or since 2013, I was a huge Nipsey fan.
Yeah.
And I always say I hate that he's not here, because I would be really interested in seeing how he would tackle the challenges that we're facing right now, because he was such a entrepreneur at heart,
100%. I think there are a few artists that have really gone against industry trends and said, fuck this, I'm an independent, like I'm a business, I don't need y'all. And he understood that. A lot of people say that. He really, really understood it. I think Russ is probably someone who is leading that space right now, who really understands the power that they bring, and that, they're like, yeah, you can help me on my operations, but I don't need you. Like, I got this.
Right.
But you're right. Like his direct to customer, his pricing point, he had a new approach to music, and honestly, and outside of music too, right? Like as an entrepreneur, as a real estate developer, as a community developer, yes, he is someone that I think everyone looked to as for inspiration, also just as a businessman.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I totally agree.
And then you have examples that are like just, I hate to give examples when I think it's like Beyonce, because I'm like, she's a different world,
right.
You know what I'm saying? But like, she's obviously like creating awesome content and documentaries, and she's doing a lot of really amazing stuff, but she is an industry. Like so it's tough to use that example for like independent artists and artists on the come up.
Right. And speaking of artists on the come up, I think you mentioned a couple of factors, but you've dealt with a lot of independent artists that I'm sure, and please tell me, those success stories that you've seen from when you kind of plucked them out of obscurity, gave them a platform, and then they kind of took that platform and ran. But what's the common thread that you've noticed in independent artists that eventually, go on to do great things in their careers?
This is gonna sound probably too generic, but brand. Like, I think artists that you really like, or that have sustained and have kind of blown up, I think they've done a better job than everyone else of creating a brand for themselves. Like outside of the music, if you hear them, you can kind of like think about what products they might go with. You can think about the universe that they fit in. Because sometimes you hear a lot of young artists and you're like, hey, you sound a little bit like this, and I don't really know what you're going for. Like, how do I describe you to someone else? I think a lot of the artists that I think have blown up have really created kind of their own lanes, like, or have filled a niche that wasn't there before, or built really strong communities. I think visuals are extremely important. I tell every artist this, like, people are connecting you with on an emotional level. And the success of your career is the value that you have amongst your fans. if you
Right.
wake up tomorrow and you ain't got no fans, you're not valuable, right?
Right.
So if you can create this community of people that really fuck with you and talk about you and tell their friends to listen to you. But the thing is, a lot of that is visual. And I know it sounds weird, but like people have to connect you on an emotional level. And if your visuals don't look good, or if the visuals don't connect, or if they're not consistent, if the videos aren't right, like it really has to be a full package. Music is super important, but if you click, you're like, I like this music. Now I want to see this. Like, what does this dude look like? What is the vibe he brings out?
Right.
You know, is he, is he believe like Earth is flat? Like, you might even fuck with the dude's artist, but if you're like, I don't fuck with this dude at all, you might not like, he's probably not a fan. So I think for artists I've seen, and I like, again, there's way too many to name that have come through A3C when they were small. And I also think consistency, right? A lot of people think about blowing up overnight. It's dudes I've seen that performed 3 or 4 times at A3C before they blew up. And I'm like, I see some small growth, but I also see consistency. And I'm like, I mean, most recently, I think DaBaby performed twice back to back. And I saw his growth year over year. Megan Thee Stallion performed maybe 2 or 3 times. 21 Savage multiple times. Lil Uzi Vert multiple times. And you can kind of see this, like, they had something and then they kind of just built on it. They didn't pivot or shift a lot. So that's a few answers right there. But I think first and foremost, artists need to understand that music is the product.
Right.
But outside of that, you need to have a cohesive, like, the music needs to fit the visuals. It needs to fit an overall brand and everything. So you need to approach it like you would launch any product, like a rollout of a Marvel movie. It's like, what is it? What is this look? What does this feel? Who are my fans? And I know that's not what artists ever think about, right? They think about making music. So their team needs to, like, have that approach, I think.
Yeah, well, speaking of team, like, you've had to assimilate so many different teams because, I started coming to A3C when you guys were, I guess, off of like Ponce, like near Masquerade.
Yeah, Masquerade, sure, yeah.
And actually, I went with DJ Scream and DJ Spins. They took me. That was like my first one. But over the years, it's been, I've met different people, who've been part of the A3C movement. So how do you go about assembling your team? Like, what do you look for?
Oh, the people that have, like, worked on the team. I mean, it's funny. Like, even myself, I was introduced to A3C through a good friend, through my good buddy at SMK, who was an intern for Brian in like 2005. A3C really, just because for the first few years, it was very part-time for me, and I would do it a few months out of the year and try to program some stuff. Not until like 2012, 2013, when I was like, this is actually bigger than a part-time job. but part of it is like passion and skill, like, and passion probably more than that. If someone shows up early and it's like, so long story short, a lot of people were like either volunteers at first and like, hey, I just want to be, I like what A3C is. I like what y'all do. I want to learn more about either event production or the industry, and I want to help. How can I help? And a lot of people would either like GSU, like students that were just straight up volunteers that we looked at and we said, that person, we would try to identify volunteers every year. So if I looked at around the team in 2019, a lot of the people on that team that had become managers, coordinators, directors 5, 6, 7 years ago were GSU volunteers or out of college volunteers. So that's a little bit of the, I think, team building of like, try to grow a passionate squad and train them and grow with them. Cause there's a lot, we were learning every year too.
Yeah, of course.
So, but that a little bit of team building is passion. You can't really, you can't buy that, train that, anything, right? So if someone doesn't care about the brand or what we're doing, the work is going to be lacking. That, because sometimes the craziness about A3C is we might not have anything to do one week, and the next week we need you. You got to be on. Yeah. And I think that also showed in the experience. I think time and time again I hear A3C about just the vibe or kind of connection and atmosphere that was created. And that was started, I believe, 100%, which is the team that kind of put it together, and just that energy that came off from managers and directors to the coordinators and volunteers.
Yeah, because I asked that too, because some of the guys that have come out of your camp, and women, I now call on them for other things, because they're moving around the industry now. They're putting on events, of course, prior to COVID, but all of them had A3C on their resume. I met them,
I'll say this, and that was my pitch to everyone too, is like, I would say to most people, is like, well, what do you want to do? So that I knew how I could help them a little bit, but also like, I know that A3C isn't a full-time job for a lot of people. So this isn't a company that you're going to grow into and earn like a living wage. A3C really is, for a lot of people, a part-time job that they could learn and use as connections. So if I knew who they wanted to connect with, and I think a lot of people took advantage of that. And I mean that in a great way. They looked at it as an opportunity, a stepping stone, what they want to do in their career. And I was there to just try to help if I could, but I'm so proud of, and even everything from our ambassadors to volunteers. I mean, there's so many people that come through A3C that are just doing awesome things.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that kind of leads me to relationships. Like, in your opinion, talk about how important relationships are, because not only with, interns coming up the ranks in the business, because you don't know where they're going to be in 5 or 6 years, like you said, but then also with booking talent, you know what I mean? And dealing with all these different personalities. So how key are building relationships?
I mean, I'm not going to, it's everything, right? You know that.
Yeah.
I mean, your value in the music industry oftentimes is who you can call. And, whether you're a manager, you're a booking agent, I mean, if you can move stuff around, how quickly can you get things done? I mean, a lot of it is, I got a favor here, or this person, is down to help, or this. Like, music industry is really based on a lot of just love, like, or like, you help me here, I help you there. There's a lot of like, let's get money together, but a lot of it is based on like, I fuck with this person, I'm down to help. And I just kind of feel that genuine, like, I dig this person. So I think for the most part, I've never been like ultra schmoozy, right? I'm not trying to like, cause I don't want to fake, I'm not a fake networker, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But if anyone needs something from me or calls me, I'm trying to help them, and genuinely, like, I'm like, I don't need anything in return. Like, let's pass this forward. So, but yeah. And I think now that this happened, like, and I think A3C, one of the biggest values it brought to the city is connections, right? And I know that because I hear about it all the time. And like you even said, like, I met people at A3C. I went with this person. I met your coordinators or volunteers or even just people. But like, I'm scared that because of this, there's also just a lot of lack of connecting with people, which is such a big part of the music industry and other industries, obviously. But that's got to be heard.
No, it is. Gary Vee spoke at A3C last year.
Yeah.
And when I'm a huge fan of him. And when I heard he was going to be there, I immediately just started like, who do I know that, that I can reach out to? And I ended up getting in touch with Mike Boyd.
That's the man.
And so we were going to set it up. And we actually did set it up, but Gary had to leave town for an emergency back in New York. But I did end up connecting him and Zay in March in New York. Awesome. So we got it done, but I was just, A3C was my connector, Yeah. It's A3C for me has been so impactful, because if you want to connect with somebody, you start your calendar early, like trying to find out who's going to be in town and how you can, align your, needs and wants or whatever with that calendar of whoever you need to connect with. Like 100%. It was, and there was nothing like that in Atlanta. You know what I mean? Not really.
No, it was that, and I'm so happy to hear you say that. And I always tell people, what you get out of A3C is what you put in. Like, if you just show up on day 3 and you're like, all right, what do I do now? I'm like, you ain't, but if you're like, all right, there's 300 speakers, 500 artists. I also know this label is going to be here. I want to reach out to this person, and you fill up your calendar and you are proactive, then you can build relationships that are going to last a lifetime. A lot of people come back every year. So like, yo, you coming back? Like, you know, it kind of builds that community and just further connects people that, you know, Mike didn't live in Atlanta. He lives in New York. So,
yeah.
But if you need to hit Mike up now, then, you know, about Gary Vee or anything else, because he's just a good dude to know and a connector. So, and again, like a cold call out of nowhere, like, hey, I want to connect but it's like, yo, you're gonna be in town. Let's link.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's great to hear that. And obviously, obviously you're a familiar face every year, and someone that's usually doing some event that we ask you to be on. And I appreciate that. I never take for granted I know A3C is done because of community involvement, right? Like every speaker, every performer, every volunteer, like it really is a community effort. So I think also when people come to Atlanta and they're able to connect with you and meet these folks on a genuine level, I think they leave with this, oh, that was dope. You know, they tell their friends about it. So I understand that and I appreciate that. So
yeah, no, it's been very beneficial. Like you said, if you know, have that spirit of, you know, connecting, not just getting something, but also, you know, giving as well. But it's been very, very helpful. And you guys, I think I really met you though in when was that? 2016 when Shawty Low passed, and we did the tribute to him. And those things don't go unnoticed too to the community as well. You know, because Beyonce actually was in town the same week he passed away, and at her concert she did a small tribute, dancing to They Know. And everybody just went so crazy, you know, because she paid tribute to one of our, you know, hometown heroes. And then for A3C to come, you know, on the heels of that and then do something to support, like that just means so much, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I always say like we were Atlanta first, and anytime we could put on someone from Atlanta or pay respects to someone in a meaningful way, you know, that was our duty almost, right?
Yeah.
And again, like, yeah, I mean, I grew up in Atlanta, and that was the sound of my youth, right? Like that was my high school soundtrack. So like it was an honor for me to even be a part of these moments in hip hop history. So, but it's always tough whenever you lose someone in this. Like when Nipsey died, that was just because it's also so recent. It was tough. Like he had performed, I think, in 2012. Maybe 2009, but with someone on our top list every year, I think, like in terms of someone we want to perform or just even speak. And a lot of times you just can't get stuff done, but that was tough.
Yeah, no, I had the opportunity to work with him in 2014 and then again in 2018. Me and Zay were in LA in the studio with him on his birthday. Last birthday at that. So, you know, that was hard when we learned of, you know, his passing. But you were talking about looking to get Nipsey, and you mentioned Dom Kennedy from LA as well. How do you go about selecting artists? And obviously not the top billing artists, you know, like the Lil Waynes and of the world, but the you know, underground emerging artists.
I think I kind of picked this up like the first year. Like this was like my plan and theory from the first year was like, we can't book hundreds of artists, right? I can't sit in a room and just hand pick artists. That will never work, and we'll never be able to grow that way. So for me, it was really about trying to find curators in different areas. And when I say curators, it could be a label, it could be a brand, it could be just an influencer or a promoter. And try to get them to come to A3C and then empower them to book. So finding the venue for them, helping with travel, helping with finance, helping with DJ sound, lighting, all this other stuff, help with promotion. So if we really wanted to book Dom Kennedy, we might reach out to a clothing line he was working with or his label, or some tie-in that he was doing and say, hey, we got an idea for an LA show. Who could put that together? Let's reach out to this promoter in LA.
Mm-hmm.
I think also we really didn't want to be A3C as a brand. I think was like, I always said this, we were the platform that people could kind of plant seeds in, but we never wanted to be the curator of exactly what was happening here.
Mm-hmm.
So you might have some, you know, on the same day, old school hip hop show, like a trap show, West Coast show, Canadian show, a UK show, a nerdcore show, a DJ battle, and all those things. I think my only like it wasn't even like, do I like this or is it good? Like that wasn't the factor for me. It was, is this relevant?
Mm-hmm.
Are we telling a story? And does this fit into like the landscape and the patchwork of hip hop culture? Meaning like, you know, if someone hit me up from like California and it was up and coming label and they didn't have any fans or movement in LA yet, and there's like, yo, we want to do a show at A3C, I'd be like, well, I don't really see your relevance in LA. Like, I'm not really seeing what you're doing out there yet. Why don't you hit us back next year? But like, I would try to find, but if they had a small movement in LA, right? And I said, oh shit, you guys are actually doing something in your city.
Right.
You should come here and do a show because let's see what the larger audience thinks of you. And that was like the baby, right? Like, so from North Carolina, promoter from North Carolina would do a North Carolina show every year. And it was called like the Waves, I think, or Carolina Waves. Did show back to back every year, but he brought the baby. We didn't book the baby. You know, I can't take credit for saying I saw him and he's the best. What I can take credit for is this kind of whole philosophy and kind of structure that we put together of let's trust the curators in those cities. Gotcha. So if I was like, yo, this is the best promoter in North Carolina, he knows what the fuck's popping there. He's got a dope event series. Let's make sure that he comes to A3C. And we would reach out to those people and court them. We're like, we see what you're doing in North Carolina. We know you did a dope South by Southwest show. We see the dope shows you're doing. We see the small tour you put together or whatever it is. Why don't you come and do that at A3C, right? So, and that's how you get to hundreds of artists, right? It wasn't us hand picking artist by artist.
Right.
And that's a lot of artists would hit us up and say, I want to perform A3C. And I would respond to them and say, okay, well, you can either submit and we can pick you and put you on a show. But honestly, why don't you try to come up with a collective? Like if an artist was from like the Midwest or something, or just other city outside of Atlanta or even in Atlanta, I was like, why don't you come up with a concept or why don't you ask your label to do it? Or if you're an independent artist, why don't you get 10 of your friends together and come up with a concept or a theme? Because it's a lot easier for me to book a 6-hour show than put on artists on someone else's show or a show of our own. Because then we have to curate our own concept.
Right.
A3C and stories and booking is a lot about storytelling. Like I said, it goes back to branding and stuff. So every show had to be a reason for that to happen. So, it's super easy for us to say, hey, Zaytoven, you want to book a 4 or 5 hour show because it's all going to have a similar vibe and energy. And at least there's a concept around it.
Right.
But if I'm just picking 6 artists from Atlanta and put them on a show, they might not sound the same. They might not fuck with each other. And then the audience is like, what the fuck is this?
Right. You have one J. Cole kind of artist, then you got one Lil Baby kind of artist. It's like,
what is this?
right. You're confusing everybody. Yeah. A few more questions, Mike. In terms of sponsorship, like how important has sponsorship, been to the brand? And then how do you go about getting sponsorships for anybody that's interested in that?
We were only able to grow as sponsorships grew, right? Like sponsorships were the lifeblood and the growth of A3C. So when we were able to start convincing brands to invest in A3C, we were able to do more. To be honest with you, like I always approach A3C like an agency, and we were like selling brands on this experience. And if you want to get on this experience, it's a great way for your brand to interact with this really avid and core audience, right? Which is the creators of hip hop culture, the labels and the influencers and promoters. And this is the group of people that can be here. If that's interesting for your brand to be a part of, there isn't a better investment probably in Atlanta and maybe even in the country in terms of bang for your buck, right? You can spend like $1 million at South by Southwest or, and probably reach not even the same core audience and not in the same city and not in the same energy. So really early on, I had to convince brands, which at the time didn't want to spend in Atlanta. right? We were not a market in 2009 when I really first started trying to sell A3C to brands. Brands didn't really, I mean, they might have been laughing maybe, but I was, like, yo, you spend money in Atlanta. And I was blown away because they would spend so much money in New York and LA
Right.
on these stupid ass parties for like 50 people that were influencers. And I'm like, yo, we got like hundreds or thousands of people that are in Atlanta, and like, this is the city. And I'm looking around like top of the charts and influencers, and these are the artists that are coming out. And I think they kind of picked up. Brands are obviously not going to be leaders in the space. Brands are not risk takers. They're very cautious. They're people that don't want to lose their jobs in these marketing businesses. So they're not going to put their neck on the line and say, we want to spend in this city. We believe in this. They're going to be like, oh, what is my boss willing? Right. And so they're going to be the last person to kind of hop on. But I think with the growth of what we did every year, with Atlanta just in general, I think continuing to grow as a city, as a viable investment, we were able to convince like national brands like Toyota, Heineken, and some of the other brands to really invest in us and look at us as a calendar event, meaning we are on their October calendar for their plan every year. And that was when we were able to really start kind of growing rapidly when we started getting brands investing in us. Now, a few tips for like how to pitch a brand. One is it doesn't, a lot of people are like, I'm gonna start pitching an event a month out. A lot of brands already spent their, quarter, yearly, their stuff. So like, for us, it was relationship building, and a lot of brands, it took 2-3 years for me to kind of get money. So I invite them out, come have an experience with us. So it was a labor of love. And a lot of it was just like, it was slow growth. Right. But I think when you start seeing other brands spend, it was kind of this evolution effect of like, oh, cool, Toyota's there, Heineken's there. This brand feels comfortable being there. Again, brands aren't fucking risk takers. So, and then we just gave them a good return on investment. They were able to see good returns, good interactions. And I think, again, that was a big part of our team that was on the brand side, was able to really provide that value and that experience that they were looking for. But it was definitely, it took 3, 4, 5 years for me to really see that turn. But also I had to go from, hey, I'm Mike from A3C. A3C is a hip hop festival conference. I had to give a whole spiel. And then, 2013, 14, 15, probably it was, hey, I'm Mike from A3C. Oh, cool. A3C, like people started understanding what we were, who we were.
Recognition at that point. Right.
Yeah. So I didn't have to do as much like convincing as I was just like, here are some things that you can do. Which was really fun to see. And then the brand started hitting us up. So again, that's just kind of with the growth of it. If you do something really, really cool, brands tend to kind of want to be a part of it if you make a splash. Yeah.
A couple more. So what's your philosophy to life? Is it different from business? Because a lot of times it seems like, I know for me, my approach is pretty much the same, whether it's business or life, which is, kind of, if there's no way, you make a way. That's kind of like my thought. But what's your philosophy on life?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? You obviously had a lot of time to think about that recently.
Right.
And I think trying to find, like even as I go and transition to maybe my career or what I want to do next, it is trying to find that light and what I want to do. And I think something like do good, right? Like leave an impact. I think if I was just working for brands and wanted like, hey, we want to do this, I think what kept me passionate about A3C was the mission of helping artists, right? Like at the core of it, we were a platform for artists to like educate themselves, network, learn, and grow. That felt like a very noble cause. And I always felt like we were doing good. I think if I ever had a job or something where I actually was like, what am I doing? Like who am I helping?
Right.
So I think doing good can really provide the passion that people need. And I think sometimes when people feel lost or something like that can help center people. Even as an artist, man, artists touch tons of people's lives, man. Like artists are super influential, and music is such a valuable, like not commodity, but it's such a valuable art that Americans really like. And hip hop is like just the impact it's had globally is nuts, and it's cool to be a part of that. But I think for me, do good and work hard. I think work hard is probably after, like, doing good kind of sets you in the track, and then working hard,
Right.
which is kind of like almost like a different way of saying find your own path. But
Right.
I think the do good is super important.
Yeah.
I think even with the passing of John Lewis, which I've thought a lot about recently, just because he's someone that I mean, growing up in Atlanta, looked to as a kind of living legend and just like a touchstone for American history. His motto was "Good trouble."
Yep.
Essentially, like, it was, let's fucking when we see injustice, let's take it head on. So I think kind of do good is like it's a very simple form of like, make sure you leave this place and make sure you have an impact on the world that's better than when you left it. So.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that, and I appreciate speaking about John Lewis. I too, like, my dad has called me pretty much every day since he's passed, because he's in Mobile, Alabama, and he's like, "What's going on there? What are you guys doing for Congressman Lewis there?" And so I've been following along, of course. Very grateful for not just obviously him, but just so many. His passing, of course, makes you start thinking about others as well, who have literally dedicated their entire lives to the betterment of society. And when you think about his legacy, it starts, or somebody like him and his legacy, it makes you start thinking about your own. And like you said, what am I doing? How am I helping others with the work that I'm spending my days doing? So
Right.
yeah.
I think you can. I mean, and it's hard, right? Because I think a lot of people, you still have to pay rent. You gotta feed yourself. You gotta like have good health. You gotta, if you have kids, you gotta take care of your kids. So like, balancing all that shit is the act of like, that is the hardest thing about being a person, right? It's like balancing all this shit. But I think if you kind of center yourself a little bit on in your work doing good,
Yep.
which a lot of people don't have the luxury of doing, like,
Yeah.
and I think also you can say noble cause doing good is being a good parent, right? Like you can find that in a lot of different ways.
Mm-hmm.
But I have, also with this, not to get too deep, but like, yeah, I mean, the passing of George, or the murder of George Floyd has pivoted my life a little bit in terms of like a call to action, to be a more active citizen, and to like, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right amount? Am I, so I think there's, if everyone, specifically white people, if they're not looking at their life and saying, am I part, not part of the problem, but am I doing enough? I think essentially, like, I think that this has given me some time. And if I didn't have COVID and I was working full time, I probably wouldn't have that time. So
yeah. I don't think it's definitely not coincidental that all this is happening, simultaneously,
No, not at all.
Yeah.
It's probably not where you thought the conversation would end, but I think it's maybe a good place to wrap it up, because I think it is a front of mind for me. So when I say do good, it is about a fight for social justice. For me, for 2020, like that's where my head is right now.
Yeah.
I think that's the most important thing to me right now. And it not that it won't be next year, but during this time, I think it's such an urgent call to Americans to fight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
I also got to send you something. I'm working on something for John Lewis.
Oh, dope! Please send it to me.
I'll email you right now.
Yeah, please send it to me. I would love to.
I'd love your feedback on it.
Okay, absolutely. And my final question is, I guess it's kind of segues into what you just said about doing good. But what's been your proudest moment in your career, or your biggest accomplishment in your career?
There are a couple that stand out, because I've reflected a little bit this last year as I kind of transitioned, but there are like two things I'm super, super proud of. They were kind of just like literally concepts that I was able to see coming to life. Because a lot of ideas you have, they just don't look like the way you want them to. You're like,
right.
Even if you did it, you're like, that just wasn't what I thought about.
Right.
But the creator complex was a space and an idea that I had. Essentially, it was like, coming out of like, I wanted, like, there's so many artists, and I was so proud of this at the time. I was like, there are 100 artists coming to A3C from around the world. And I was so like, at first I was like, that's just the coolest thing ever. Then I was like, man, they're spending their money, they're flying, their thing. I want them to get more out of Atlanta and more out of the experience than they put in. Mm-hmm. So just kind of like challenging myself on that. And then I, you know, put my manager hat on. I was like, well, we should just give them a bunch of free resources and not education, because I think that's what we do already.
Right.
So the Creator Complex came out of that. And we built a facility for one day for 10 hours. And we asked a bunch of creative professionals, so website developers, logo designers, like a mastering company, lander, recording company, bio writers, all these different professionals to come into a space and just donate free time. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I cannot tell you, the energy in that space was so cool, because artists were just like really appreciative. These are, you know, young up and coming developing artists.
Yeah.
Never had a logo, never had a website. Some of them, their bio just was like where they're from. So like, I really saw that as like, holy shit, we're giving like hundreds of thousands of dollars of free services to artists that they may not done. And I know this to be true, because I reviewed a lot of artists, and I look at artists. Mm-hmm. When you're young and you're starting out, the difference between success and not success can sometimes be as small as a professional photo. Yep. Or a bio that's not written well.
Right.
And I think people are just like, because you're trying to get people to be on your team and in your circle, mm-hmm. and people need to feel like you got your shit together.
Right. Right.
So if your shit looks janky, then how are you going to build a team?
Right. Nobody wants to invest their time in that.
Nah, but if you come to someone's like, yo, I got a professional photo, my website's clean, look at this bio's dope. So I felt really good about that. And like an anecdotal story was, I never, you know, like I walk around A3C like a ghost. No one really knows who I am. And I saw this artist just like beaming, walking down the street. I'm about to cry. He was walking down the street, and I could see he was leaving Creator Complex and coming towards the conference center. And I'm like, yo, I saw he had a badge. John was like, yo, where are you coming from? He's like, I'm coming from this family Creator Complex. He probably even got the name wrong. And he was like, and it was like 4 p.m. He goes, I showed up at 10 a.m. when it started, and I just left. And he was just, you could tell his mind was racing. He's like, I got a bio, I got my photo taken, I just developed a website. And he was just so excited. He was so excited. He was like, I came here from Chicago. No one takes me seriously. Mm. And I honestly, for the first time, and he was just like, for the first time in my life, I feel like I know what I'm doing. And I was just like, I asked him a couple more questions, and he was just like, man, they treated me like I was a professional artist. You know, like, I don't know. It was just such a proud moment for me, because I think that was really what I wanted to see come out of it.
Yeah.
And we did it 2 more years. So we did it for 3 years. It's something that I would love to see tour. It's a product or an experience I think is so impactful. Mm-hmm. I think it's an economic driver for cities, because it's free resources, as opposed to handing an artist money and saying, spend this. A photo can cost hundreds of dollars we got Motion Family, right? We got really good photographers to shoot this shit.
Yeah.
So we got the best of the best to come in there. We weren't looking for like interns to come in there.
Right.
So that was really cool. And then the second thing is just we launched in 5 years ago. We launched the Action Accelerator, which is, we put out a request for a proposal, and we said, and this was kind of the doing good. We a long time ago, we said, are we doing enough good? And we started saying, let's start looking for people that are using nonprofits and just individuals that are using hip hop culture for social justice in their communities. Mm-hmm. And we put up $10,000 and said, we'll get $10,000 to the best ideas, best concepts, and best things. And maybe 2012, 2013, I'm trying to think of the first year we did it, but it was 5 years ago. Mm-hmm. After 2014. And we brought them, we would give them we give them the travel money, place to stay. So we're like, we don't want you to worry about money. Then we put them through 3 days of intensive training at the Center for Civic Innovation about nonprofit development, sustainability, ideation, and pitching. Then they would pitch in front of a panel of judges, and then we would give away $10,000.
Nice.
Unbelievable. I mean,
Nice.
to see the camaraderie that was built there. Winners from past years were coming back to be judges and just support. The winners from these organizations went on to win fellowships, more money, grow, help more people. I mean, that, you know, with a small financial investment, with the right idea, with the right execution, we were able to really help some people that then can help other people. And I mean, it wasn't what we set out to do when we did A3C, right? We were about all these things, but I think once we realized we had this this platform to do other things and to do more good, it became the thing that I was most proud of. And it was the most emotional experience, because these people that were running these organizations. Sometimes there's 1-2 people. These weren't large nonprofits. These were, someone's like, you know, a story from our first winner. She started a summer camp for children that wanted to get away from homelessness. So it was a camp for homeless students or kids that were struggling with homelessness, in and out of home or stable home, and was giving them 2 weeks of just art camp. But think about that. It was just a release from the stress of being a child and kind of having this attention and having this art. And Malika, for the first time ever, and this is a story she has told now, so I feel comfortable telling it, started this because she was also a child with not stability at home. Now she runs a nonprofit with like 5 people and has a board, and we were the first people to actually invest in her. And it's Chop Art, and you can look it up. It's an amazing organization, and she's an amazing woman. But we saw what small amounts of money and real attention can have an impact. And it blows me away that we were able to help people that are able to do good work. So those 2 things.
That's incredible. And the cool thing about it, you have no idea, like there's no way you can quantify like what that really means. Do you know what I mean? Because
100%.
It could go on and on and on, you know what I mean? So, yeah.
We also just didn't see anyone doing it. And so when we first did it, we were just like, is anyone doing it? Like, we just didn't know. So when we put out the request, we just sent an email blast to our audience and say, hey, if you know anyone, tell them to submit. And we had like 200 people submit. And there were some great people that we weren't able to pick, right? We only picked 5 every year. So we know that and I think it also renews your faith in just people, because it's like, there's some awesome people that are just giving every dollar, every dime, every hour they have to help someone else. And these are not people that are, you know, these are not fortunate, like, I've got a bunch of money, so I'll help people. It's like, man, I got a few extra hours a day, I'll run an aftercare program. Or I got a few extra hours, I'll teach writing to students from a public school near me. And, you know, like, that's just like, you know, if you're able to do that, then how can we help you do more good if you're willing to do that? So.
Right. No, that's incredible. And I don't think I asked you this, but seriously, this is last. But what does A3C 2020 look like? Is there an A3C 2020?
Yeah, I can't break. Yeah, it's going to be an online version of just of a conference. So from day to day, moving forward, I'm you know, this will be my last year kind of on the team. Ryan and TK and Paul will be taking over management, and then they're going to hire a new executive team, which I'll be helping hire. Okay. So before a pandemic broke out, we were interviewing and in the process of putting out offers to a new executive team. So a new director, a new marketing director, new sponsorship director. And then we realized very quickly that we were hiring people for a place and a job that wasn't going to exist this year. Yeah. So we hit pause on that. And I think, you know, also we understand that, like, there's just an oversaturation of online shows right now. There's a lot of really great conference content. So we tried to figure out where we wanted to fit in that space. We are going to have a presence online in October. But I think, you know, and I say this is like, that's not who we are. That's not what A3C is about. You know, we are about physical connection. We're about experiences. So it's really hard to replicate that online.
Yeah.
When people go to a concert, yes, they want to see the artist, but really the artist is the promoter of a party. Like, if I go to a J. Cole concert, I know what the girls are going to look like. I know what the vibe's going to be. And I know that my people are going to be there, and you feel a sense of community and warmth. Mm-hmm. The same goes with like a turn-up show. It's like, I know the energy. I know there's going to be some bad bitches there. I know people are going to dress like this. I'm going to dress like this.
Yeah.
And they are putting on a live experience for you to do whatever it is you want to do. If you want to drink, if you want to meet someone, if you want to just hang out with your friends and have an out night.
Yeah.
But a concert is way more than I just want to see this artist perform the music live.
Yeah.
Right. That's a part of it. And that's the front facing thing. But a live concert is really about people kind of coming together and having a good time together.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Because you had me in the back of my mind reminiscing about, what I like about, live shows, and that's it. It's
100%.
Yeah, it's about that connection.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's an outdoor concert, shit, I'm gonna go there and fucking light up and like sneak in a handle with my sneak in a little flask or something like it. But like that's
right
on the lawn, and if it's I think hip hop's really best in 200, 300 capacity venues that are like just tight, because I think that energy of just all these people on the same note at the same time is so dope. And if people, if the artist is good enough where everyone knows the lyrics and the words, that energy is crazy. And people like the right song or the right beat comes on, everyone got the stinky face. It's just like that's not something that like technology can ever take. Like that's not a VR experience.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah, you can't replicate that. Yeah, not at all. But thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you for everything you do, and hit me up anytime.